Hi everyone, I'm Kevin Johnson, and this is my friend and author Michael Crowley, who has a new book coming out called Working the Sea, which draws deeply into our national fishermen and Atlantic fishermen collections. And we're going to learn a little bit today about Michael and about his past and about his book. So this should be fun.
We'll see.
So Michael, you started off fishing and not writing. How did that come about? And tell me a little bit about your fishing past.
How I got started fishing. Well, I had just graduated with a master's degree from San Francisco State. And that's, of course, San Francisco. Living in Berkeley, and I wanted to get rid of the stress that accumulates when you're doing graduate study. Plus the fact that's also was the time of People's Park and all the student riots that were taking place in Berkeley especially.
Are we talking the 60s?
Yeah, we're talking the end of the 60s.
Okay.
And but probably about 1969.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to figure out how to keep my sanity and do something different. And maybe I had read too much Jack London in college, but I thought adventure was the key. So I got on an airplane at San Francisco Airport, flew to Anchorage, and
With no real plan?
no real plan. And I got off, and there happened to be a guy at the Anchorage airport who was from Seward Fisheries in Seward, Alaska, and he was there trying to recruit help. So I just signed up, and they bused me to Seward, and I started. That's really the first time I ran into had anything to do with fishing boats, because I was driving a forklift, and it would. And I would, when a boat came in to sell their fish, I would drive the forklift, and they'd put the fish in the cart that I was pulling, and we'd head back to the cannery, and that went on for some time. But every skipper on every boat that I got fish for, I asked them, okay, do you need help? I'm here. I'll go with you, no problem at all, I'll be really good. And so that went on, and
But they knew you were green in the sense that you hadn't done it before?
oh yeah, they knew didn't know from straight up. And so after 2 or 3 weeks or something, the guys that I worked with at the cannery came as early in the morning. This car came screaming into the driveway of this Quonset hut I was living in, and they said, "It's your chance. They'll take you. You've got a chance, get going." And they had brought 2 old pair of rubber boots and some sport fisherman foul weather gear, and they gave me that. And so I went and jumped on the boat. And then we headed out, and the skipper, we headed out into Resurrection Bay outside of Seward, and the skipper had second thoughts, so he stopped the boat, turned around, and went back to get the guy who didn't show up.
The one that you were replacing?
That I was replacing. And I thought, oh hell, so that means I'm back on the dock. And as soon as we got back to the dock, the crew went and they hightailed it into Seward, and they found the guy. Turns out he had gotten wound up with one of Seward's ladies of the night, and so it just didn't make it to the boat. But the crew brought him back now, and we all went out, and I went with them.
Oh, you got to go?
I got to go, and that's how I started fishing.
What were you fishing for on that first trip?
That was, it's for halibut. It was for a halibut longliner called the A2, which is in the book. And I mean, that was an adventure just in itself, that first trip. And I was seasick for probably 2 days, just hanging over the rail, puking in the sea, and everybody laughing at me. It's not a good way to break in to the fishing fleet. And they were making jokes at me about I'd go up in the wheelhouse to stand a wheel turn, and one of the guys said, "Okay, now we're looking for fish, so if you see a halibut come to the surface, you call us. We'll know. I mean, this is where we can fish." And they'll come up to right up the surface. And I said, "Sure, got it." And so then he went back down, and about 20 minutes later, I heard all this laughter coming out of the wheel, where they are, because halibut are bottom feeders. They never go to the surface. So I was sort of the joke for a couple, 2 or 3 trips anyway. But yeah,
But eventually you cut your teeth and
Yeah.
became a fisherman.
yeah, so that's,
And for how many years did you end up fishing?
I was there about, I'm going to say 4 to 6 years.
Did you think you found your new career at that point, or were you realizing that this is
No,
not-
every trip was an adventure. I will say that. I went to Alaska looking for adventure, and I found it. And it's how I found National Fisherman. On one of the trips, I was in the bar in Kodiak, Alaska. And this is between trips. I was at the bar, and I looked in, and on the counter there in the bar, there was this magazine thing. And I hadn't seen it before, and I started thumbing it, and that was National Fisherman. I had never seen a copy before, but that was on the bar, and it was thick then. It was probably 100 and some pages.
Well,
And so,
in its heyday.
yeah, and so I thumbed through the classified section, and there was an ad there for a schooner for sale, 37-foot schooner, I think it was, Blue Nose Junior. And that's a scaled down replica of the Canadian Blue Nose Junior. So I thought, well, I knew a little bit about Blue Nose. And I thought, well, that might be neat to have, to go see. And so I think that was a break between 2 trips. And so I got on an airplane and I flew back to the East Coast where the boat was. Turns out the boat was in Camden. So I went and looked at
Camden,
it.
Maine, not Camden, New Jersey.
No, Maine. So I went and looked at it, I bought it, and then flew back and finished the fishing season. And then that was it for my commercial fishing. And then I came back to Camden because that's where the Blue Nose Junior was. And well, Camden at that time was also the headquarters of National Fisherman on 21 Elm Street. And it was right the floor above, Roger Taylor's International Marine.
Okay.
And so I started going up into National Fisherman. They had a room there for freelancers, and with a couple desks and everything. And so eventually I decided, well, I'll maybe try to freelance a little bit. And so that's what I did.
And this would have been in probably the mid-1970s at this point?
Yeah, sometime around there. And I also wrote for I freelanced for other magazines and in the area, and including Republican Journal and editing that. And So that's how I got into National Fisherman and became familiar with it.
Okay. Did they hire you on full-time at some point?
No, not then. A few years later they did. I was field editor, boats and gear editor for 4 years, I'm guessing.
Okay.
Something like that. And that's how I started to become familiar with National Fisherman's publications and the photos, and then eventually doing research for something, I ended up coming to the museum and looking at your collection. But the National Fisherman photos I found just very captivating. Kind of an adventure in themselves.
So at some point, like, you worked for them for close to 50 years, it sounds like.
No, I mean, I might have done a little bit of freelancing every now and then, but I was not a full-time employee. And eventually, I was, but that was, limited time.
Okay.
Limited time, but I was still freelance for them.
Did freelancing involve getting back on boats and going to more fishing trips?
No, I didn't need to go back fishing. No, it involved going to boat yards, seeing boats being built, going on boats and new boats. And
photographing yourself, right? You took some pictures yourself.
Yeah.
Well, at some point, I think it was around COVID, you decided you wanted to do a book drawing from the collection.
Right.
What made that light bulb go off?
Well, the thing about, and I then was familiar with the museum's collection, the photos were the attraction. I mean, that was the drawing. I mean, there are so many thousands of them, and they're so different from anything I had been familiar with or seen. And they just cover all sorts of the fishing landscape, and even some of the marginal areas. And I thought this made just a good story. Some of it, because I'm sure that many people are not familiar with how extensive the collection is in terms of subject matter.
And I don't know, at some point we decided that we were going to shoot for 100 images.
Yeah.
So how was that process of picking out 100 out of
Oh, that was fun.
25,000 or something?
That was totally fun. I mean, the photos were the drawing card, the attraction, and some of them I had, what they were depicting was totally new to me. And I mean, yeah, I've got that listed. I mean, there's some of those that both, not because I had mostly been familiar with doing National Fisherman stores with boat construction.
Okay.
That's mostly what I covered. But this was going off, these photos go off into all sorts of different theaters.
So you were learning at the same time you're writing.
Oh yeah, no, it was an adventure.
And what would make a photo a keeper? Like one of, that you could find references in the magazine that...
And not make things up? Okay. Part of it it's just that each photo that was the attraction. And they were just telling me things that I was not familiar with, about mutinies or boat images that I kind of had heard about but hadn't seen, especially much older ones.
Yeah, we should make a note that the Atlantic Fisherman magazine came out of the Atlantic Fisherman and Maine Coast Fisherman, and a lot of those older photos
Yeah.
were brought forward and
They're
used
part-
as old-time photos in National Fisherman.
Yeah. No, yes.
And made a
that's
big
true.
part of your book, some of the
Yeah.
older ones.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's some really good ones with stuff that I had heard about but had not seen before.
Well, so we both know how long it took to find the 100 and do the write-ups, and then there was another equally long waiting period where we weren't sure if the book was going to come out, and then it did. So let's talk a little bit about some of your favorite photos. The book will be coming out early next month in December, and we'll have some other events surrounding that, but let's whet people's appetite about what they're going to find in the book. And if you want to...
Well, there was one there, Doug McLean, and he's skipper of the 92-foot mackerel schooner Pinto, and a photo taken about 1906. And he's smoking a clay pipe. Now, when I was in college, I thought it was really cool being a guy to smoke a pipe. I thought, yeah, this makes me intelligent and, you know, something that women will love. But it just didn't always work out. But McLean is smoking this clay pipe, and that you can right away tell that's a working guy's pipe. And it turns out in Gloucester, at smoke shops, they would have in their windows, some windows, I saw some pictures of them, the clay pipes stacked 1.5 to 2 feet high. I mean, this was a real working fisherman's pipe. But he's on, as I said, 1906 is taking it, but what he's wearing too. And this is one of the things that the photos told me stuff that I didn't know. Is what he's wearing. Foul weather gear now is a lot of PVC type stuff.
Sure.
And I have to read this. But he is wearing what they called oilskins then. The pants and jacket started out as unbleached cotton cloth fabric stitched together and dipped in vats of yellow or black linseed oil mixed with turpentine and a drying agent. After the fabric was run through wringers to remove surplus oil, it was hung up to dry. The pants and jacket were then coated by hand, dried, and coated once more. A final coating required the addition of varnish to the material, to the mixture, which helped seal the cloth and made the fabric shine. And Gloucester had 6 companies manufacturing those clothes in 1880. But that's the kind of thing that these photos informed me about that I had no idea.
Did you find Mr. McLean representative of, he was kind of the iconic fisherman?
Well,
Really?
he's the skipper of that, is 92-foot. Yeah, I would say he is.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's a great photo, and he just looks like he's representative of
I mean,
the whole
he's
industry.
staring out at the sea. Guys are working behind him, and he's obviously in charge. Nobody's messing with him.
Yeah.
He's got his clay pipe and his foul weather gear on.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was good.
So, also included in the book is a photo of the halibut schooner that you first went out on.
Oh yeah, too. And it might have been the launching day, 1924. And it just had sweet lines to it. It was easily driven hull and stored, enough fish to make the whole thing worthwhile. And in the mid-1950s, maybe 180 of them were fishing
Wow.
in the Gulf of Alaska.
This
And
exact type of
That
boat.
type, yeah. And my skipper on the Attu, he had two brothers, and each of them had their own halibut schooner, the Grant and the Northern. And I think their father before them had one of them. So this is something that family sort of handed down like that.
Well, this also had to be extra special. This is the boat that you started
That's
your
a
short
boat.
fishing career on.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It ended up, probably 1990, it hit a ledge somewhere and sank.
Well, I'm glad you weren't on it then.
No, that would have been a wet day.
Yes.
Um,
Let's talk about another photo.
This is something, and this was another area where the photo collections were just educational for me, because I kind of heard about drying racks, but I had no idea what they looked like, what they were doing, anything like that. But it had these drying racks covered with salt fish, and this in East Gloucester, Gordon Pugh's. The fish would be split, cleaned, washed, and salted, and went on drying racks. And the ones that are shown in the photos, I guess, had 125,000 pounds of fish
Wow.
on these racks, just out in the fresh air. We hope fresh.
These mostly cod.
Yeah, I'm assuming that. And they would sit and dry there for up to 7 days
Wow.
before being packaged and sent off.
Wow. It must have been quite a sight and a smell.
That would have been. But again, that was something I don't think I would want to live next door to it, but I definitely got a lot out of those pictures.
Sure. And what about the, you had mentioned before, the Boston Fish Pier being a kind of a quintessential spot in terms of fishing history.
Yes. Well, you look at the photo, and the boats are lined up. They're tied to the dock, going to unload. And the photo is probably the 1920s. And they're being unloaded into hand carts. Then they'd be taken off to wherever they went. But it was just right down, I don't know if it's the center of Boston, but pretty close to it, I think. And what I found by 1936, 350 million pounds were being unloaded there annually.
Wow.
And that was, visually, that was something that I kept coming back to, just because I was so intrigued by all these sailing schooners tied up there. I mean,
And most of them would be coming from the Grand Banks?
I don't know, I'm assuming that.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I assume. And these hand carts that guys are pushing around to take the fish off the boat, I think there was a strike, and the hand cart drivers or pushers had a strike at one point where they were getting 10 cents a load, I think, and they wanted 20. and I think they got it.
Wow. Well, it's probably an important job. There's
Right.
kind of a short window of getting that fish off the boat and into the market.
Yeah, very definitely.
I would say it's worth 20 cents a load. How about Mr. Lenfest?
Yeah, Freddie was a boat builder in Jonesport, right across from Beals Island. And he was a well-known builder of wooden lobster boats. And at one time he was telling me he learned how to design his boats. Starting when he was a little kid, he'd build wooden models and tow them through the water on a string. And he said that's how he got to design his boats and build them. And he also, like a lot of lobstermen up there, he loved to race. And it was said that a couple of times, and that's his boat, a couple of times.
RW?
Yeah, a couple of times he was offshore hauling traps, and he would encounter a Navy destroyer. And he would challenge it, he would race it for a mile or so. And somehow I don't think he beat it, but
Did the destroyer know they were racing?
this is a question that we're not approached in this story.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so a mile offshore, this little 30-some foot lobster boat is racing this big, humongous destroyer, and Freddie's probably thumbing his nose at it. In 2013, it was put into the Maine Boat Builders Hall.
Oh, really?
Racing Hall of Fame, Maine Lobster Boat Racing Hall
Sure.
of Fame. Yeah.
Okay, what other one do we want to talk about?
About 1981, and there were 150 salmon trollers. There were two over 600-foot steel not trawlers, container ships coming into San Francisco. And 115 salmon trawlers went out and put themselves in the way of these two and said, you can't come in. And I guess they were right up against the side of these two boats, pushing off, salmon fishermen.
Why were they trying to keep them out of the harbor?
Well, they were trying to draw attention to shortened salmon seasons, negotiations that weren't going anywhere with the state, and a canceled June 1981 offshore salmon season. And so eventually, 115 salmon trawlers, and these two huge boats, eventually the container ships cut their engines, because then the Coast Guard came in and guided the container ships in. And all the time, the helicopters were overhead filming this whole thing. And that's what one fisherman said, that gave them what they wanted. Live television and news coverage. And evidently the coverage went from New York to Los Angeles. And one fisherman said, man, looks like we got the coverage, one fisherman said during the skirmish. The whole country is going to know about this. So, visually, you look at it and the photo, these boats are huge. Salmon trawlers are little tiny things. And they're all right in front of these container ships. We just crush all of them, if they wanted to.
Yeah.
But there were two of these container ships that they stopped, so that's what they wanted to do. And that's not a picture I expected to see in National Fishing. No, so I like that.
Yeah, no, that's a good one.
Yeah. Walking the Water is another one. Did you have that one?
I did.
Oh, yeah. Because I've been fishing in the Bering Sea and seeing these trawlers, these big steel trawlers fishing there, and they were just another world away from us. And I just thought that...
Because of their size?
Because of their size, yeah, and the length of time they were out there. Fishermen, when they're especially up in those places, and the Bering Sea, you can go to St. Paul Island, and there are a couple bars there, and it's a great place to just hang out and be foolish. But these guys on the big boats, they could never get in there, not like we could. So the skipper and the poly trawler, Barbara Lee, and his deckhand, they'd been fishing for weeks. And so they decided they were going to have some fun. So they had set out the trawl net, and then they had taken in all but the cod end, which is where the fish are that you catch.
Yep.
So this cod end was full of fish, but they left the cod end out behind the boat. And then they decided, and I'd never seen anybody do this, they were going out and they each grabbed a beer, I guess, and they went out and walked on the cod end. You know, the cod end's about this wide, and if you fall off, I mean, that's pretty cold water,
Yeah.
and who knows what might happen to you. Or there's another boat going by, and the wash from that big boat could also knock them off, but it didn't. But so they went and walked out some distance on the cod end, and then they ran back and up onto their boat.
And lived to tell the tale, and someone was smart enough to capture it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is good.
That is good.
Yeah, I kind of wish I had tried that. So.
I don't think you'd catch me doing that. I don't like cold water to begin with, let alone.
Well, if we decided to do it, you'd have to do it.
Well, we don't want to give away the whole book, but I think we've given us a few nice teasers to get people interested. I believe that the book comes out around December 2nd. Well, Michael, thanks a lot for spending some time with me and talking about the book. It's been great working with you on it and getting to know you better. And
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, this has been great fun because I got to go through all these photos, and as I said, that there are just so many that just totally surprised me. Although I thought I knew about commercial fishing and what people go through, and boat construction and actual fishing. But I mean, that was totally entertaining.
good. Well, I think you're going to be entertaining a lot of people with this book.
Okay, good, and then hopefully we get movie rights.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.